My husband let me open our marriage, then disappeared, leaving me with nothing. It all started when I suggested the idea that I thought would save us. The tension had been building for months, and I had tried everything to hold our marriage together. We had always been so close, or at least I thought we were. But as time went on, it felt like something shifted between us. My husband, Mark, had become distant. It wasn't just that he was working late or spending more time on his hobbies. It was the quiet moments, the empty space between us, the absence of his touch, his smile. We had been together for almost a decade, and I thought we were in a good place, but something in me was desperate to feel that spark again. I began to question everything about our relationship. I could feel myself slipping, losing that connection we once had, the one I believed defined our marriage. One night, after a long, frustrating conversation about where we were headed, I threw it out there. I was unsure of the words, but the desperation in me led the way. "What if we open up our marriage?" I said, my voice shaky but clear. It was out there now, out in the open. Mark froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. The room felt thick with the weight of my suggestion. He set his utensil down slowly, his eyes locking with mine. He was silent for what seemed like forever. "You want to do what?" he asked quietly, his voice almost a whisper. "I thought it might be a way to breathe life back into what we had," I explained quickly. "I don't want to lose you, Mark, but I need more. Maybe we both do. I mean, we've been so caught up in our routines, our responsibilities. Maybe a little freedom could give us what we've been missing." I had been reading a lot about open marriages, exploring the idea in my head for months. At first, it had been a fleeting thought, but over time, it began to feel like the only solution. I wanted to feel desired again. I wanted us both to find joy in a new way, something exciting, different from the stale routine that had crept into our lives. It wasn't that I didn't love him. It was just that I thought this might bring us closer somehow. Mark blinked, almost as if he had to process what I'd said. He let out a long, heavy sigh. "I don't know, Jenna. That's a lot to ask for. I'm not sure it would work for us. We're not like those people you read about." "I'm not saying we have to go all in with it right away," I reassured him. "Maybe we just give it a try, see how it goes. Maybe it could help us find what we've been missing." I saw the hesitation in his eyes. I saw his fear. Fear of change, of not being enough, of being replaced. But I also saw something else. I saw the relief in his face, the curiosity that was starting to creep in. "What if it helps?" I pressed, trying to convince him. "What if we find a way to rekindle our love without losing what we already have?" Mark sat back in his chair, staring at me, as if trying to assess if I was serious, if I was really prepared for what I was suggesting. He took a long, deep breath. "Okay, but we set boundaries. No emotional attachment. This is just about freedom. No one gets hurt." "Of course," I promised. Though deep down, I wasn't entirely sure if I could stick to those rules. I had so many feelings tangled up in this idea, feelings I wasn't even sure I could explain to myself. That night, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I thought I had done something for us, for our marriage. I thought this was the answer. What followed was not what I expected at all. The first few weeks after our agreement felt strange, almost like we were treading water in an unfamiliar pool, trying to figure out how to keep afloat without sinking. Mark and I had some deep, honest conversations about boundaries, about what we wanted, what we didn't want. It was awkward at first, as we tentatively tested the waters. I had a few dates with other men. Nothing too serious, just some light flirting, some attention that I hadn't felt in years. I wanted Mark to see that it was harmless, just a way to experience something new without jeopardizing what we had. But there was something in his eyes that didn't seem quite right. He was distant, not just emotionally but physically. Our intimacy became more strained. The kisses were mechanical. The sex felt like an obligation rather than a desire. And every time I came back home from a date, Mark would greet me with a forced smile, but there was a look of unease in his eyes. He never said anything directly, but I knew that look. It was the look of someone who was slowly losing trust. Then, one night, I came home from a date with a man I had met at a bar. I didn't expect to find Mark gone. His car was missing. I checked my phone, but there was no text, no note. I wasn't sure what I had expected, but this wasn't it. It wasn't until late the next morning that I received the text. It was short and to the point. "I think we need to end this. I'm done." I read the words over and over again, my heart pounding in my chest. I was confused, lost. What did he mean by this? Was he leaving? Was he going to walk out after everything we had been through? After I had tried to save our marriage? In a daze, I tried calling him, but he didn't pick up. I sent a dozen texts, each one more frantic than the last, begging for an explanation. Hours later, he finally called me back. "Mark, where are you? Why are you doing this?" My voice cracked as I spoke. "I thought we agreed to try this. I thought we were okay. I gave you the space you wanted, Jenna. I gave you what you asked for. But this isn't what I want," he said, his voice cold, detached. "But Mark, I love you. I wanted us to be happy together," I pleaded. "I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't think it would go like this. We can fix this. We can—" "You were right, Jenna. You said we needed something to fix our marriage, but I think I was wrong to give in," he interrupted, the anger rising in his voice. "I can't do this anymore. I can't be in a marriage that's not what I signed up for." There was a finality in his words that hit me like a blow to the stomach. He wasn't even trying to understand me, to see the love I still had for him. The tears began to spill from my eyes. "Mark, please don't leave me. I didn't think this would break us. I thought this would bring us closer. Don't you see that I love you? Don't you care about that?" "I did care, but you broke me," he said quietly. "And I can't come back from that." The words Mark had said to me echoed in my mind long after the call ended. "You broke me." I couldn't shake the image of him walking out, of the cold finality in his voice. The shock, the disbelief. It felt like a punch to the gut that I couldn't escape from. I had tried. I really had. I thought opening our marriage would be the answer, that it would fix the cracks that had started to appear in our relationship. But I never imagined it would drive us apart in such a dramatic way. The pain of hearing him say he couldn't come back from what had happened was almost unbearable. For the next few days, I barely left the house. I sat in our empty living room, numb, staring at the walls that once held the laughter and warmth of our life together. I replayed everything in my mind over and over. Had I misjudged everything? Was the mistake mine? Had I truly been that selfish to think opening our marriage could save us? I tried to call Mark again and again, but he didn't pick up. He didn't respond to my texts. Each unanswered message felt like another nail in the coffin of our marriage. I had no way to fix it. The person I had loved so deeply, the person who had been my everything for so many years, was gone. It was a strange, cruel feeling, the feeling of being alone in a marriage that I thought would last forever. The worst part was that I had brought this on myself. I had made the suggestion. I had been the one to ask for this. But how could he leave so easily? How could he throw everything away? I still loved him, more than anything. How could he just walk away after all we had been through? Was it truly over for him, or was he just trying to escape the hurt that had built up over time? In the days that followed, I found myself spiraling further into despair. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I would lie in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, imagining him with someone else. The jealousy gnawed at me, but it was the emptiness I couldn't escape. The crushing feeling that the life I had known was slipping away, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I finally decided to visit his apartment, desperate for any answers, any closure. When I arrived, the familiar sense of home was gone. The door was unlocked, and I stepped inside, hoping he would be there, but the place was eerily quiet. I walked through the rooms, searching, hoping, but all I found were the remnants of our life. His clothes hanging in the closet, a few of his books on the coffee table, a picture of us from a vacation years ago. It felt wrong being there. It felt like I didn't belong anymore, like I had lost my place in his life. As I stood in the middle of the room, I felt the tears well up in my eyes once more. I wanted him back. I wanted to fix everything, but I didn't know how. But no matter what I did, the truth was becoming clearer and clearer. I couldn't undo what had been done. I spent the next few days in a haze of confusion, trying to come to terms with the fact that he was gone, that our marriage had ended, and that no matter how much I wished it, I couldn't make him come back. I had hurt him too much. The trust was shattered, and nothing I said or did could piece it back together. The decision to divorce came quickly. Mark didn't drag it out. He filed the papers a week after he left, and I was too lost in my grief to fight it. He had made it clear that he couldn't move on, couldn't live in a relationship where I had been with someone else. He wanted out. We went through the motions of the divorce process. Lawyers were involved, and everything was broken down. Our assets, our property, our savings. It wasn't a long or drawn-out battle. Mark had decided that he wanted to start fresh, and that meant he wanted nothing to do with me or the life we had shared. When the settlement was finalized, I was surprised. I didn't expect to get much from the divorce. I had made the mistake, after all, by suggesting the open marriage. I thought that Mark would be the one who walked away with the majority of everything we had built together. But Mark surprised me. He didn't try to take it all. In fact, he didn't contest the settlement at all. I ended up with half of everything: our house, our joint accounts, our savings, alimony. It wasn't much, but it was enough for me to rebuild. Mark had made it clear that he wanted nothing to do with me, but he also didn't want to leave me destitute. Maybe it was his way of saying he didn't hate me, that he wasn't going to make this harder than it already was. Or maybe he just didn't care anymore. Regardless of the reason, I found myself with half of what we had built, and a strange feeling of powerlessness washed over me. I had what I needed to move on, financially at least. But emotionally, I was lost. How could I go on living without the man I had loved so deeply, the man who had shared my life for so many years? I had opened our marriage thinking it would bring us closer together, but it had torn us apart. It wasn't right. It wasn't fair. How could he do this to me? I still loved him. I still wanted to make it work, but he was gone. I was left with the remains of what we had, and no matter how much I tried to cling to those memories, I knew it would never be the same. Days turned into weeks, and the reality of Mark's absence began to settle in. I had lost him. The man I loved, the man I thought I would grow old with, was gone. And I was left with nothing but the pieces of our broken marriage. I tried to keep busy, to fill the emptiness with distractions, but nothing seemed to work. The pain of loss was all-consuming. I had made a mistake. I had thought I could control the outcome, that opening our marriage would be the answer to our problems. But instead, I had pushed him away. I had lost him. And now I was alone. But the most difficult part was this: I still loved him. I loved him more than words could express, more than I could ever explain to anyone. I didn't want to lose him. I didn't want our love to be this thing of the past. But how could I undo what had been done? I spent days trying to make sense of it all. I thought about what he had said, about how the idea of sharing me, of seeing me with someone else, had torn him apart. I had thought it was a solution, a way to save us. But now I saw the truth. It wasn't the answer. It was a mistake. As I sat in the quiet of my apartment, surrounded by the emptiness, I realized that what I wanted most wasn't freedom. It was him. I wanted to fix things, but it was too late. He had made his decision, and I had to live with it. But how could he do this to me? How could he leave just because I wanted us to try something new? I still couldn't understand it. My heart ached with the injustice of it all. I was left alone with half of everything we had, but none of the love I had wanted so desperately to keep.